Josmar Trujillo. I'm an organizer with the Coalition of Broken Windows. We're here today with family members, people who've been affected, community advocates, ahead of the hearings at 10 a.m. in the Public Safety Committee on gang takedowns. We're here to call out gang raids and the gang database as being something that racially profiles our communities and actually tears families apart. So our first speaker today is going to be Vidal Guzman from Just Leadership USA, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about his experiences dealing with police and harassment around the gang issue.
Your name again?
Vidal Guzman, V-I-D-A-L, last name Guzman, G-U-Z-M-A-N. That's good we're here. I know it's rainy, but as we talk, there are individuals right now that was probably incarcerated at 16 years old, part of the gang database that are doing 20, 30 years. What the New York City Police Department is saying that this gang database is actually helping out. Not at all. What this is actually doing as a person was a former gang member, member of the Bloods, is that as I see this gang database, this hasn't helped out in any type of way. What it's doing is kidnapping and feeding Rikers Island, feeding these jails and prisons upstate. This is not something that is helping at all. When you look at this database, what it actually does is incarcerate and take father figures from the household, take family from a household, from families, from communities. So how is that helping out? And then they come back to us and say, how can we help the community out? We asked for help. We didn't ask for gang raids. We asked for help. We didn't ask for the Stop and Frisk 2.0. This is what it is.
Next, we're going to have a young man who was caught up in a 2011 federal gang sweep. This person, I think, who has actually felt the effects of gang policing at the most personal level, is here with us today and can speak on what has happened in his life as a result.
Good morning. Your name first? My name is Dante Barber, D-A-N-T-E, Barber, last name D-A-R-B-E-R. I'm a youth leader at Friends of Island Academy. And basically, my experience with the gang raid is on the morning of September 27, 2011. At the time, I was living in a two-bedroom apartment with my mom and my two siblings. And that morning, I was picked up on federal charges. The charges stem from my ages from 16 and 17 years old. When they came to get me for the raid, I was 18 years old. That morning, I was disturbed out my sleep and detained in the hallway of my project housing. When I was detained, despite me already being detained, I was in the hallway detained, and they actually still raided my apartment when they only had permission to detain me and search my room if necessary. Now, once they finished with the raid and my apartment was destroyed, after that, my mom eventually was kicked out of public housing and went homeless for some years to come. Just the military tactic that they used and the kind of military dressing and the way they came in with the guns and the intimidation that led trauma in my family. Of course, my mom went homeless, and it just shows that it became more popular after that in our communities, and it's not working. It affects more than just me. It affected my family, and to this day, it's something that we'll never forget, and every time I see it, it pains me deeply.
Thank you. So we're also here to make sure that people understand that this is not just the New York City Police Department, but these are federal agencies. As we've seen an uptick in gang raids across the city, more and more, and especially in boroughs like the Bronx, we're seeing federal involvement. The fact that this government under this administration has ratcheted up the rhetoric around gangs and around immigration in particular, we have to call out the mayor and call out anyone who is in favor of the gang raids to see if they're on the side of Trump, they're on the side of large-scale gang sweeps, they're on the side of criminalizing large groups of people, because what we're seeing in the Bronx is not unlike what we're seeing across the country, what's happening under the banner of fighting gangs. So one of the points that I got involved in was 2014, which at the time was the biggest gang raid in the history of New York City in West Harlem. And at that time, the police used one person's death or two people's death to create a narrative around uncontrolled violence in the neighborhood. and as a result, 103 people were indicted. We have here with us an attorney. Jason?
Jason Martin, criminal defense attorney. I'm glad to see everybody out here, but my thoughts on the matter is that we operate from a false premise. We think that these are misguided policies or incompetence, but I think these things are done very intentionally, very purposefully, and very strategically. You know, they've been switching strategies, but the ultimate goal remains the same. I believe this is sort of like an ethnic cleansing of the city. And they're using these gang databases and different things and different policies to sort of change the demographics of the city. Now, we tend to be very myopic and look at these things very narrowly and forget the bigger picture. And that's why every time we defeat one strategy or win one battle, we're right back here a few years later because they already figured out a way to sort of achieve the same goal but with just a different strategy. They started with the drug war in order to sort of facilitate mass incarceration, the felonization and marginalization of the youth. But since the drug war has sort of affected their communities, or white communities more now, they shifted the paradigm and shifted the strategy to gangs and youth violence. But it's the same goal, just a different strategy. So this gang database, or this label as a gang member, is sort of like an old Jim Crow era type tactic, where you label a group so that you can treat them a certain way or treat them as second-class citizens. There's no way to know how this information that's contained in these databases, who has access to it, how it will affect employment, getting government aid, government housing. Since it's sort of like a new thing, we don't know how far-reaching the consequences are. So I'm in the midst of writing something called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. There was a time where they used to take our communities at gunpoint and basically just tell you to leave. But things have become more sophisticated now. Now they use the law, they use policies, but the ultimate goal and the ultimate result is still the same. It just takes a little longer and it's a little more silent than it used to be. And one day we're going to look back and see that war was declared on communities of color, and we just realized it too late. So hopefully, you know, this is the start of something where we can not only attack the gang raids as a strategy towards an ultimate goal, but also look at the bigger picture and address those issues as well.
This can really affect your housing status, particularly permanent exclusion when the city tries to exclude you based on gang allegations or allegations of crime.
If someone is arrested, they can be permanently excluded, which means they can be kicked out of their housing. What does this do for our homeless population here but increase it for young black lives? Just because someone is like falsely accused of gang allegations, they can lose their housing, their whole family can lose their housing. What does this mean for young black lives in New York City? What does this mean for black lives? This is violent. This is the violent against black lives. This has been going on for decades, as my man said, from the war on drugs, and this is just a continuation of it. A lot of people are falsely arrested, and you can't fight that with NYCHA. Once you are arrested, you are permanently excluded. Even if a family member who doesn't live there, who's staying at your house for a temporary amount of time, if NYCHA finds out about it, they can be kicked out of their housing. And we know that this happens to poor black folks. We know that the NYPD works with NYCHA for these gang raids to run up in these houses. So it is super important that we understand who this impacts, why is it impacting them, and how long it's going to be. It's for a long time. These are permanent impacts on young black lives, and this needs to stop.
This is bigger than the database. This is a much bigger conversation than just one list or even a few lists. The database is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to gang policing, and we want to make sure that family members and people who are affected, the people that oftentimes newspapers report about without asking them and talking to them about what, if these allegations are true, if they are actually gang members, none of that has happened. And now in 2018, years after the escalation of gang raids and collaboration with federal authorities, we're finally starting to hear from these families, but these families have been speaking out for a long time. And it's time finally that the city starts to listen to them. We're hoping that the city council will listen to them and take their plight seriously. We have no we don't expect the police department to listen to them, but we expect that lawmakers in this city will do their role as oversight and actually ask tough questions and actually try to get us to a point of answers. Because right now we have so many more questions than we have answers. Next, I wanted to bring up Victor.
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, another aspect of this gang database is very intriguing because last year in November, I was actually pulled over by an officer what I thought would have been a routine traffic stop. Gave him my license and registration, and he walked away to a squad car. Within minutes, came back and asked me to step out the car. I asked him, why am I stepping out of the car? All he said was, he'll let me know. So unfortunately, I was very tired from work. I decided not to combat them, and I stepped out the car. He proceeded to place me in handcuffs, and I asked him, was I being detained? He said, yes, you are being detained, but it's for my own safety and your safety. That moment, he placed me in a squad car, and while I was there, I'm a big guy, as you can see. I was a little uncomfortable. So just with the fidgeting around, I happened to see the monitor, and there was a mugshot of me that said security risk. So from that moment on, I realized that the gang database is something serious. And granted, I was let go that night, but had it have been a different person or someone that would have been acted completely different, that traffic stop could have resulted in a completely different outcome. It would have had a completely different outcome. But the fact that they decided to detain me in their squad car because I'm labeled a gang member is outrageous to me. And I did not know until that day. And this is years later. So that's a big effect that it can have on our community members. And we don't think it should happen to anybody else. It's very over-inclusive, and that precision policing does not make sense in my mind.
So what we're also saying is that there are solutions that are community-based. When there is violence in our communities, and most of the people here you're going to see them testifying today are from the communities that the police are saying that they're helping. And what we're saying is that there are community solutions to community problems, and the police don't have the motivations to actually change the community and actually change lives the way that community-based violence interrupters and activists can actually have that understanding with the community. So I wanted to bring up a speaker from GMAC, an anti-violence organization in the city that works to be the solution, and so the police don't have to be.
Good day. My name is Sean Dugan Fata. I'm the founder of GMAC Incorporated, which stands for Gangsters Making Astronomical Community Changes. I was first incarcerated at 16 and became affiliated. And because of my affiliation, it changed the dynamics of how the system dealt with me inside of Rikers Island, as well as how they sentenced me. Years ago, I made changes with my life, and I started an organization to combat this same issue. The issue that I wanted to combat was the violence that was happening in my community, so I formed GMAC Incorporated. We are now a crisis management system provider in New York City, receiving funding under New York City Mayor's Office to prevent gun violence. In our communities, we deal with the shooters. We deal with those who have been put in the databases, and we help give them a solution to the problems that's happening in our community. We mediate conflicts in real time without no guns, no vests. We just use our passion and our experience to show them that there's a different way in life. What we've come to realize in doing this work is that they will take a group of young brothers sitting in the park, see them hanging out together, and group them in a gang database. You sit in the park, you hang out for a couple hours, they see you in that park, and you've been identified as a gang member. Now that changed the dynamics of your life. So the next time you get into any type of interaction with law enforcement, now they've escalated your charges because they've identified you as a gang member, didn't tell you that, and didn't try to provide any resources to confirm if you were in fact a gang member. These are the problems that continue to send our young people to prison for extensive amount of time because they escalated by making it seem as if they're terrorists, and say that because of gang enhancements that your time has to become more than someone who commits the same crime from another neighborhood. So our work in the community is really about finding solutions to the problems. While we're asking for those questions that we need to be answered, we want to take that back to our communities and help our communities do something different to change the dynamics of how they keep getting put in a database that says you're a criminal and there's nothing left for you in this world, and we cannot continue to have that happen to our young people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as we continue to try to highlight what has been happening, we're asking for the chair of the Public Safety Committee, Donovan Richards over here, to use his platform and to use the powers of the City Council to try to get some answers and try to get more clarity and transparency. This morning, Chief of Detectives Dermot Shea wrote an op-ed, and they're going to testify today. and they're going to put forward a narrative that we've seen be put forward for the last few years. And what we're saying is that the transparency conversation almost never happens with the police department, but particularly around what they do with gangs, they basically are saying, trust us, we know what we're doing. And so when they put someone in a database, their way of kind of saying that this is okay is that it's been, if an intelligence officer or a gang unit officer puts your name in a database or tags you as a gang member, then his supervisor has to authorize it. And that's the check and balance for the NYPD. The NYPD says, trust us. Not only are we putting people in, but we're double checking to make sure that this is right. And we know from experience, we know people who can tell you from experience, they're no longer involved in that life, or they were never involved in that life, and yet they're on the database. I also want to emphasize the part of the information that was shared on Monday and that was shared with legal advocates is not only the number of people that have been added to the database under de Blasio, but the ages of the people that have been added. A person who was 13 years old was added to the gang database under Mayor Bill de Blasio. This is someone who frames his policies as being progressive, frames himself as being a champion of reforming stop and frisk, and yet we have people barely teenagers, people barely out of middle school who are being added to the gang database. And there are more than one. There are several that are, I think hundreds that have been added that are under 18. So this is not only an issue when they're talking about gang members and the worst of the worst, we're talking about just all of New York City, but we're talking about a particular focus on young people who have not even reached the age of being able to vote, but are yet have been put onto a secretive gang database that they don't have the ability to, one, know that they're on, or two, be able to get off of. And so we're gonna roll along here. We wanted to talk a little bit about particular issues in New York City, but also tie in the issues with immigration and what's happening with the Trump administration. So I wanted to bring on an organizer with the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, Al, to talk a little bit about the overlap with immigrations and deportations.
My name is Albert St. Jean. I'm the New York City organizer for Black Alliance for Just Immigration. Yeah, so basically, what's going with this database, we understand that most of the gang policing that takes place in immigrant neighborhoods of color, particularly in black neighborhoods of color, like Crown Heights, Flatbush, Canarsie. In these neighborhoods, we see SRG patrolling on a regular, a unit that's meant for terrorism, patrolling in our neighborhoods on a regular. Not only do they patrol on a regular, they've killed people in our neighborhoods, particularly in Crown Heights. Last year, 2,000 people were deported from New York City based on their interactions with law enforcement. So to call this city a progressive city, to call this city a sanctuary city, is disingenuous. When you have broken windows policing, and when you have a secret gang database, which likely many undocumented folks are on, for whatever reason they don't know, because we don't know the criteria that gets people onto this gang database. Living in a neighborhood, hanging around the people that you grew up with, being a kid that likes to play outside is up until you're a teenager, that does not make you a gang member. But that's what qualifies some people to be called a gang member, or to a group of people to be called a gang. If they're just kids that hang out in their neighborhood, if they're kids that actually try to live a full life within their neighborhood. So we cannot have this gang database. I mean, first of all, I'm wondering why the NYPD is not being transparent, not coming forward with this. This is Gestapo tactics. This is secret police tactics. When you have a secret list of people and you don't know who's on it or why they're on it. It's very, like I said, it's very disingenuous for us to call ourselves a sanctuary city. We are not a sanctuary city. As long as we have a secret gang database, as long as we have broken windows policing, as long as 2,000 people a year are being deported based on their interaction with law enforcement, we are not a sanctuary city. And for all you other immigration advocates out there, if you are not talking about black liberation, if you're not talking about policing in New York City, you're really not getting to the heart of the issue of immigration and deportation in this country, because the NYPD is aiding and abetting in the Trump administration's agenda. Whether or not they're directly cooperating or not, they are aiding and abetting in the Trump agenda. Thank you.